Hey guys, this is the instructional video for assembling two of the Swarovski STC 17 to 40 power 56mm objective spotting scopes together with the Adams adapters, STC Big Eye adapter plate to make a set of Big Eyes. The first thing you're going to want to do is just double check your kit when you receive your adapter. Make sure everything's there. You're going to get all the tools needed, which is 3 Allen keys. You're going to get all the hardware included. Number 6 screws. These are the 2 that are 5/8 of an inch long. The rest of them are 3/8 of an inch long. You're going to get 2 1/4-inch flathead screws. You're going to get 6 1/4-inch socket head screws and 4 washers. You're going to get 2 upper bases, 1 handle, 1 main base, and 8 rings. 4 front rings and 4 rear rings. The way you can tell the front rings from the front rings are going to have a counterbore on the front of the ring. That's what mounts it to the front of the upper base. The rear rings are not going to have a counterbore hole. What they have is a threaded hole in the bottom, and that's how they mount to the upper base. So threaded holes are rear rings, counterbore holes are front rings. So the first step of the assembly process is just going to be taking one of the spotting scopes and mounting one of the upper bases to the spotting scope. When doing that, all you do is use the threaded hole in the bottom of the spotting scope. On one side of the upper base, you'll see there's a countersunk hole. That's going to go face up, right over that threaded hole. And you use one of the 1/4-inch flathead screws. Drop it in there, and we're just going to snug that up. Not 100% tight yet. We want this assembly to be able to move a little bit so we can do a self-alignment as we're putting the rest of the hardware on. When you mount this upper base to the spotting scope, make sure you use the screws that I included in the kit. If you need to replace them or you lose one, I can definitely get you another one. Or if you go to your hardware store and buy one, just make sure you don't buy a 1/4-inch screw that's longer than 11/16. The 3/4-inch flatheads will actually go too deep into that hole, and they'll actually bottom out on the inside of this spotting scope. What that does is that'll actually break this base free. It'll act like a jack screw and it'll pop it off. So do not use anything longer than the screw I provide in the kit, which is a 1/4-inch flathead. It's 11/16 long. If you go to the next size up, which is 3/4 of an inch, it's too long, and you risk breaking this base free of this spotting scope. So just make sure you use the screw I gave you, or something that is not 3/4 of an inch long. 11/16 is the max length you want to use. Snug that down, and now you're ready to mount the rings. Okay, when you're mounting the rings, you've got front rings and you've got back rings, you've got left rings and you've got right rings. You really can't put them in the wrong spot or the hardware doesn't work. But just to make sure everyone understands which rings are which, when I refer to the left or the right side, what I'm talking about is taking the objective and pointing it away from you as if you were going to look through your spotting scope. This is the left side, this is the right side with the objective facing away. The front rings have the counterbore hole in them. That's what mounts it to the upper base. So front rings have a counterbore hole. The rear rings, or the back rings, they do not have a counterbore hole. What they have is a threaded hole in the bottom. That's what mounts them to the upper base. So rear rings, threaded hole. Front rings, clearance counterbore hole. What I do is I take the scope, just leave it face up, just like this, and you take one of the front rings, counterbore facing up, and you lay it right over the upper base. Take the left front ring, counterbore facing up, and you lay it right over the upper base on the left side. Now if you look at the ring, there's actually a gap there because these rings will actually compress that rubber armor a little bit. When the screws are tight, the entire ring will go together and everything will fit nicely. But when you just set it on there, you'll see there's a little bit of interference. That's intentional. We want that. Then what you're going to use is the shorter number 6 screws. These are the ones that are 3/8 of an inch long. You're going to put one in each front ring. And you're going to snug those down. What I do is I tighten those down until I feel it bottom out. Do that on both of them. You can put a little bit of pressure with your right hand as you're squeezing those rings together. But what you're looking for is that screw to bottom out, and what that does is that helps self-align these rings so they're perpendicular to this upper base. Once you get them to bottom out, just break them free just a little bit. And again, that's going to let the two rings align to each other when we mount them to each other. The next step is just screwing the right ring to the left ring. As you can see on the right side of the scope, these two holes are counterbore. The left side of the scope, there's no counterbores. On the top of the scope, that counterbore hole is going to take the shorter 3/8 long number 6 screw. Just drop it in the counterbore hole, and you're going to snug that up also. As you snug that up, you'll see that gap on the top will close up. Once that screw bottoms out, just break it free, just like you did with the rest of them. Then this is the only place that you're going to use the longer 5/8 long number 6 screws. So one of the longer screws, drop it in that counterbore hole. You'll feel them bottom out, and then just break it free. Okay? What you should end up with is the front rings flush to each other. Nothing should be protruding out here. All of that should fit nicely. These should be perpendicular to the bottom. And your focusing knob should move freely with no interference around this gap. Everything looks good. Everything works freely. Now you can mount the rear rings. All you need to do is install the rear ring into that slot on each side of the upper base. You'll notice that one of the rear rings has a threaded hole, and one of the rear rings has a counterbore hole. That counterbore hole will match the front rings. So you see on the front rings, these both are counterbore. On the right side of the scope are the counterbore holes. On the left side of the scope are the threaded holes. So we're going to take the counterbore hole on the rear ring, and we're going to put it on the same side of the scope as the counterbore holes in the front. All you do is slide it into that slot right there. The counterbore hole should be facing the same direction as the front rings. Then what I do is I just align the threaded hole on the inside and drop in one of the shorter number 6 screws. These are the ones that are 3/8 of an inch long, and we're just going to snug that guy up. Bottom it out, and then break it free. Do the exact same thing with the left side of the scope. This is the ring that's threaded, no counterbore. The same as the front ring, no counterbore. Slide it in the slot. Gently squeeze it together with your right hand. Drop in the short number 6 bolt, and do the same thing. Bottom that out. Once you feel it bottom out, just break it free. Now you can mount the 2 rings to each other. On this side there's only one. It's at the top, and it also takes the short number 6 bolt. Drop that in there. You'll feel it bring the rings together. Break it free. Now you should have an assembly that looks like this. That's not tight yet. We just want to double check that again, that focusing knob moves freely. The variable in the back moves freely. Nothing's interfering. Everything looks good. There's an even gap around the focusing ring in the front. There's also a gap around the focusing ring in the back. So our rings are not interfering with that focusing knob. Now we can go ahead and tighten everything up. Tighten up the ones on the bottom. Tighten up the ones in the front. Tighten the top one on the rear ring, the top one on the front ring, and the bottom one on the front ring. Now all your number 6 screws are tight. Remember to go back and just snug that flathead bolt in the bottom. So there's your sub-assembly. Upper base, front rings, rear rings mounted to your spotting scope. Now just do that again for the opposite side.